Sometimes when we reach for the stars, we fall short. But we must pick ourselves up again and press on, despite the pain. Their truest testimony will not be in the words we speak, but in the way they led their lives and in the way they lost their lives.
NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening from the Johnson Space Center in Houston. This is the nerve center of the Space Shuttle program, the training ground for the 7 astronauts who were killed in Tuesday's violent explosion. And so it was fitting that this today was the site of the NASA Memorial Service, the formal farewell to that crew which was so representative of the many faces of America. Thousands gathered in a grassy area where so many past triumphs have been celebrated, and the short, simple program drew heroes from the past. Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon, a national goal set by the father of this young man. This is John Kennedy Jr. Military men, technicians, secretaries, the NASA family, joined by President and Mrs. Reagan, who met privately with the families of the Challenger crew.
We come here grateful for the many ways we have known those whom today we mourn.
God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea.
When his turn came, President Reagan mentioned each of the victims in his remarks, and he pledged to continue the space program.
What we say today is only an inadequate expression of what we carry in our hearts. Words pale in the shadow of grief. They seem insufficient even to measure the brave sacrifice of those you loved and we so admired. We remember Dick Scobee, the commander who spoke the last words we heard from the Space Shuttle Challenger. We remember Ellison, Onizuka, who was a child running barefoot through the coffee fields and macadamia groves of Hawaii, dreamed of someday traveling to the moon. Being an Eagle Scout, he said, had helped him soar to the impressive achievements of his career. Sometimes when we reach for the stars, we fall short, but we must pick ourselves up again and press on, despite the pain. Man will continue his conquest of space, to reach out for new goals and ever greater achievements. That is the way we shall commemorate our 7 Challenger heroes. Dick, Mike, Judy, Elle, Ron, Greg, and Christa. Your families and your country mourn your passing. We bid you goodbye. We will never forget you.
One emotional moment followed another. A jet left the flyover. The missing man formation. A final personal moment before the Reagans returned to Washington, the families to their private grieving, and NASA to its search for a cause of the tragedy that brought on all of this anguish. This memorial service understandably attracted most of the attention, but there were others around the country today as well. Services and ceremonies to honor these 7 victims. NBC's John Dancy tonight takes us through some of them.
For a national tragedy, there was today the healing unity of grief. Grief for astronaut Ellison Onizuka, a Japanese-American Buddhist. For Ronald McNair, a black Southern Baptist.
America at its best. 2 women, a Jew, a black, an Asian, white males.
Grief for Judith Resnik, a woman and a Jew.
What is important is not her death, but that she lived. A life once lived can never be taken from us, will never be taken from us. It is eternal.
and for Navy Commander Michael Smith, a graduate of Annapolis.
Our pride in this remarkable person is undiminished.
And finally, grief for Christa McAuliffe, not a test pilot, not one who tested death, but a teacher, one of us. After Apollo 8 showed us the first stunning pictures of the Earth, entire and whole, poet Archibald MacLeish wrote, "To see the Earth as it truly is, small and blue and beautiful in that eternal silence where it floats, is to see ourselves as riders on the Earth together, brothers on that bright loveliness in the eternal cold, brothers who know now they are truly brothers." Again, today, the nation was united in the brotherhood and sisterhood of grief. John Dansley, NBC News.
I'll be back with more from the Johnson Space Center in just a moment. Strong currents off Cape Canaveral made it impossible today for a small robot submarine to search for the wreckage of the Challenger. But that search does go on, and as NBC's Robert Bazell reports tonight from the Cape, so does the search for what caused the disaster. Bob?
Tom, workers here at the Kennedy Space Center stopped today to watch the memorial service. But offshore, there was no let-up in the recovery operations. This Coast Guard helicopter has just located another piece of the Challenger. A crewman throws a flare to mark the spot. Small boats move in to recover the piece. Boats, helicopters, and airplanes continue to search the Atlantic today. Sonar devices on some ships located a large piece underwater. Officials think it may be the crew compartment, but so far there is no proof. The pieces recovered so far include this section of the outside of the spacecraft, with the emergency rescue hatch intact. NASA investigators are now examining thousands of pounds of debris. One major focus of the investigation, according to sources, continued to be that there was a leak in one of the solid rocket boosters. The shuttle is powered by 5 rockets. The 3 main engines get their fuel, liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, from the huge external tank. The 2 solid rocket boosters are powered by a mixture of chemicals with the consistency of rubber. Here is some of the compound ignited in a laboratory. It burns at a very high temperature. As they burn, the main engines leave little vapor, while the solid rocket boosters create a thick plume. According to the theory, a split developed in one of the welded seams on one of the solid rocket boosters. This caused a tongue of hot flame to shoot at the external tank, burning a hole through it and igniting the explosive mixture of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. The solid rocket boosters are manufactured at the Morton Thiokol Company in Salt Lake City. A company spokesman had this response.
When NASA announces officially that NASA is investigating something or has come to a conclusion, that's when the information becomes factual.
One problem with the investigation is that the booster rockets were destroyed after the explosion because one was believed to be threatening a populated area. Only the nose cones remain. Those parachuted into the water. Tom, the latest speculation among NASA officials now is that that tongue of flame from the solid rocket booster hit the explosives package on the external tank, which is designed to blow it up in case of an emergency, in case the whole shuttle is headed toward a populated area. And at this memorial service in Houston today, some NASA officials were heard to say that if only the astronauts had had a few more seconds, they might have had time to jettison those tanks, and they might have had time to make a safe return. They didn't have those few seconds. Tom?
Bob, tell us now about the continuing search. How many teams have been organized by NASA, and are they divided up into debris teams and electronic signal teams and so on?
A lot of hard work. Some people are focusing on what's being recovered from the ocean. Other people are looking at the computer data. Other people are studying the engines. Every possible bit of information is being assembled by the panel, which is meeting, and they promised us just a few minutes ago that they will have some sort of statement late Sunday evening.
All right, thanks very much, Bob Bazell at the Cape tonight. At the same time, youngsters around the country are chipping in and collecting pennies, nickels, and dollars to help pay for a new space shuttle to replace the Challenger. The idea for that fund came from a nonprofit Space Education Foundation. The cost of a new space shuttle is about $2 billion, however. Another fund has also been started by the National Education Association in memory of Christa McAuliffe. This money will be used to help other teachers take on pioneering projects.
Dick, Mike, Judy, Elle, Ron, Greg, and Christa, your families and your country mourn your passing. we bid you goodbye. We will never forget you.
The nation joins the president to honor the 7 who died in space.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Tonight reporting from the Johnson Space Center in Houston.
Good evening. It's been a very long week for the country, and had it not been for the tragedy, Dick Scobee and Michael Smith and Judy Resnik, Ellison, Onizuka, Ronald McNair and Greg Jarvis might well have gone on doing their jobs in relative obscurity. But now, along with Christa McAuliffe, the teacher, they are, as the president makes so clear, people we know by their first names. And their names are now etched in the annals of American exploration. Off the coast of Florida today, the search teams are picking up the pieces of their shuttle, like this one. We shall not soon forget Challenger. And here at the Johnson Space Center today, much of the nation gathered in spirit to say goodbye. Sam Donaldson came with the president.
They gathered in the open air, surrounded by the buildings that house the space program, for a simple, plain memorial service.
We're gathered here today as a family that shares a common dream, common goal, common commitment, and now a common tragic and devastating loss.
The President and Mrs. Reagan sat with the immediate family members of the lost crew, and behind them sat other relatives and friends, space agency officials and employees, members of Congress, and other dignitaries, including Senator Edward Kennedy, whose brother, the President, gave the space program such a boost, and that President's children, John F. Kennedy Jr. and Caroline. They all heard Mr. Reagan strike a note of sadness and of perseverance.
We remember Ronald McNair, who said that he learned perseverance in the cotton fields of South Carolina. His dream was to live aboard the space station, performing experiments and playing his saxophone in the weightlessness of space. Oh, Ron, we will miss your saxophone, and we will build your space station.
The most emotional moments of the ceremony came at the end, when the Reagans said goodbye to the family members. A final salute as T-38 trainers flew over in the missing man formation. The Challenger crew gone, but not forgotten. Sam Donaldson, ABC News, Johnson Space Center, Houston.
One of the very touching things about where the ceremony was held today is that it was on the spot, where so often the people from the Johnson Space Center have gone to say, welcome home. America has had a manned space program since the late 1950s, but it took many years before women and black Americans became astronauts. And it may be true that Judy Resnik and Ron McNair would not have liked all the attention today, but in Dr. Resnik's hometown of Akron, Ohio, and in North Carolina, where Dr. McNair went to school, their friends and their admirers wanted very badly to say, we are proud of you. In Akron, ABC's Jerry King.
While the world knew her as the second woman astronaut in space, here at Temple, Israel, in Akron, they mourned Judy Resnik as a friend, a relative. Among the congregation, Resnik's mother, Sarah, and her father, Marvin, and brother, David. There was Sally Ride, the first woman astronaut, and the members of the crew who flew with Resnik on her earlier successful flight a year and a half ago. The mission, which meant Judy Resnik had joined other Ohioans, Wilbur and Orville Wright, John Glenn, in pioneering aviation and space travel.
Judy Resnik stretched beyond the reach of most of us. She knew she would be home, she would be at home in space. And she was. And she is.
What is important is not her death, but that she lived. A life once lived can never be taken from us, will never be taken from us.
After the service, as the family and friends tried to comfort each other, here too a final tribute arranged by NASA. Sally Ride and the other astronauts had a salute of their own, the Resnik family hand sign, meaning love and togetherness. Jerry King, ABC News, Akron, Ohio.
This is Rebecca Chase in Greensboro, North Carolina. It was here at A&T State University that astronaut Ron McNair earned his bachelor's degree in physics. Today at a packed memorial service, this predominantly black university paid tribute to one of its own.
He was a true Renaissance man who exulted in the conquest of the difficult and the unexplored.
36-year-old McNair was a physicist, a laser expert, and the second black in space. He always said he never let obstacles get in his way, and he encouraged others to follow his lead.
He taught us to dream. He helped us believe that we could do anything we really wanted to do.
With McNair's help, the university set up this space shuttle laboratory and designed a group of experiments which are scheduled to be performed in space on a future shuttle mission.
He'll continue to be our inspiration to carry out this project.
Today, another famous alumnus paid a tribute to the man who had served as an inspiration and a role model for so many.
Dr. McNair belongs to the ages now. Long live the spirit and legacy of Dr. Ronald McNair.
Rebecca Chase, ABC News, Greensboro.
In Concord, New Hampshire, where Christa McAuliffe has had so much attention, her friends and her admirers wanted some privacy. And so at Concord High School this morning, the press was asked to stay outside. There is this evening a more public demonstration of pride in the woman who was scheduled to teach her first lesson from space
A nation, too,
today.
will long feel the loss of her 7 sons and daughters, her 7 good friends.
Because we live in the age of television, the country can sometimes seem very small, as it was today, when we come back. Perhaps we've all asked ourselves many times why it is that this particular tragedy has had such an effect in every corner of the land. And one answer surely is that because of television, we did all experience that instantaneous flash of destruction. And today, as Bill Blakemore makes clear, you didn't have to be in Houston.
When in Houston, the roar of engines shrieking overhead finally shook loose the tears, that was heard and felt as well in Garden Grove, California.
We're still blessed
in the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. In an elementary school in Clear Lake City, Texas.
Where the microphone...
When the head of state moved to each member of the families, that was seen and felt as well at Cape Canaveral, in a Chicago department store, a Sacramento classroom. There was a children's mass in Ohio. Guns were fired at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. From the George Washington Bridge over the Hudson River, the giant flag hung down. It's normally brought out only on national holidays. In those minutes today when there would have been the first classroom lesson from space, silence, observed in schools from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The Librarian of Congress reminded us today that pioneers don't go forth alone, nor die alone. Bill Blakemore, ABC News.
And in every corner of this land today, we all want to know what happened. The searchers go on looking. Here's ABC's Lynn Scher.
It is the largest chunk of wreckage yet found. Challenges familiar snubby black nose. Ironically, along one side, the word rescue indicating an emergency hatch that was never used. But the pieces of debris that are said to be among the highest interest to NASA investigators are the hunks of metal that once were the shuttle's solid rocket boosters. Each 150-foot-high Roman candle is filled with 1 million pounds of propellant, comprised of 4 segments fitted together. There have been reports that a leak between two of the segments might have acted like a blowtorch, possibly cracking the huge fuel tank and igniting the explosion. And there's speculation that an explosive charge designed to rip the tank apart in an emergency might have contributed to the massive blowup. That, of course, is only one possibility, and NASA officially claims it's looking hard at all angles. But so far, it hasn't released pictures taken by some of the more than a dozen cameras trained on Challenger during launch, pictures that could show the other side of the doomed spacecraft. In another development, 2 robot TV cameras are being lowered to the ocean floor to peer at what they believe may be the pressurized crew cabin. Out of respect for the dead astronauts' families, NASA made no comment on any human remains today. And though virtually all the teams stopped working today to honor their fallen colleagues, most then tried to put their grief aside.
We've been analyzing the data, trying to determine what happened.
You're going back to work this afternoon?
Yes.
And the Interim Investigation Board returns to the Cape to pursue its search for clues tomorrow, in hopes that the ceremony held here today need never take place again. Lynn Scher, ABC News, Johnson Space Center, Houston.